heard of Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh and his followers, commonly known as Rajneeshees or sannyasins, from the incredibly popular Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country. Well, in today's episode, we speak with a former follower of the Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh cult to get a better understanding of how this society functioned, what it was like to live in normal society as a member of the cult, and what it was like on the famous Oregon ranch. We are joined by Annie, who wished to remain anonymous, where she explains how she first found out about the cult and what inspired her to join it in the first place. She also shares what life was like as a Rajneeshee in normal society, and she goes into detail about what it was like visiting the ranch in 1983, when she believes much of the footage used in the documentary was filmed. Now, I know this might be somewhat of an unconventional episode for us, considering that it doesn't really have much of a role when it comes to technology. However, if you're like me, then you probably enjoyed the documentary, and you probably want to get a better understanding of what it was like from someone who was actually there. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. The first question really is just like how it all began. Like, how did you first find out about Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh and the Rajneeshees, and what inspired you to join their, well, cult, I suppose, if you think it's fair to call it that?
Okay, sure. We can call it a cult if you like. People like to. They like that word. So my entree into Rajneesheeism, I guess, if you want to call it that, was atypical. It was very uncommon and unusual, I bet. For me, it happened because I went into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous at 16 years old. That's another story, but due to that, I ran into some folks in the program of AA, which I guess is supposed to be anonymous, but since we're only using my first name, I suppose it really still is. And so through there, even though I was very young, only a teenager, like I said, I met some adults, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, who were involved in the cult. At that time, we called ourselves sannyasins. That's what Bhagwan called us. So I guess I found that curious, interesting, attractive. They were a couple of people that I had connected with the most anyway. And so I think that at some point I ended up going along with them. I just was curious about it and said, what is this all about? And went along with them to some events, casual events. And that's how I was introduced in Santa Cruz, California.
Okay, fantastic. I'd be so curious, what was your first reaction like when you first went there? What was that like experience like?
Well, my particular background, I was born in Berkeley and raised in Santa Cruz. So I've essentially had the most liberal possible background from birth. And so I guess to me, in Santa Cruz at that time was very counterculture, very hippie culture. You know, this was in the early 80s, so it still kind of had some residual 60s and 70s feel. So I guess a spiritual group that seemed real chill, fun. There was a lot of great energy. Didn't seem so unusual to me. So I just liked it and I hung out and I got to know more about it.
Interesting. I can see the appeal there. I get that. And you said that you visited the ranch in Oregon twice, but you didn't reside there as some members did. Now, in the documentary Wild Wild Country, that I'm sure like maybe our listeners are probably familiar with, we see a lot of it focus on life on the ranch. I'd like to know what it was like being a sannyasin living off the ranch in everyday society. And were you like always surrounded by others? And did your life change much in society as a result of like you joining this group?
Okay, yeah. Well, I did visit the ranch for visits. And I can speak to that later if you want to. But yes, life outside the ranch as a sannyasin or Rajneeshee is brutal because we're very, very visible. So for those who may not know, part of the cult was to dress in certain colors, very vibrant colors, the approved colors, I guess, or suggested color. Everything's suggested. You don't have to do anything. But we chose to follow that suggestion. So you would wear all red, purple, pink, or orange at that time when I joined. I think it started out as only orange. And we wore a mala, which is like a necklace that has a picture of Bhagwan on it. Those are a couple of the 4 basic principles. And so unlike other religions where you might walk around in normal society and no one may know that you're a member of that particular cult or religion or group, we are very, very visible. So it ignited a lot of fear and suspicion in others. So everyday life was really confrontational. People were curious, offended, scared, upset, but a number of emotions. So everywhere you go, that's what you're dealing with.
Are there any like memorable experiences of people from the public, where either like good or bad, that you remember like getting in society generally when you obviously wore this outfit?
Well, I got fired from all my jobs. That was one negative thing.
Wow.
Yep. And also people, whether it's in public or maybe people that I know as friends or acquaintances. So if it's friends and acquaintances, I would get 21 questions. And also I'd often have to sit through their objections to it, even though I hadn't asked what their objections may be.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I am. Those were some of the negative, that's some of the negative fallout is that, people want to spew their opinions on you, or they did on to me. So I guess you find out who your friends are, because
yeah,
that's some of the negative impact. As I recall, I really felt it was kind of a trial by fire, and kind of that in itself, I guess, was a spiritual experience. And perhaps that's what Bhagwan intended by it. I don't know, but that's what it was for me. Now I know what it's like to be part, in a sense, I know what it's like, perhaps, to be part of a minority group, or a group that faces a lot of suspicion, prejudice, assumptions, projections. Now I learned very early in life what it feels like to really, really stand out and face people's fears and prejudices.
Yeah, a valuable lesson nonetheless. I mean, did you find yourself surrounded by many other sannyasins, or they're like few and far between in the society you lived in outside the ranch at that time?
I lived in Santa Cruz County. There were quite a few at that time. So I would go to events. There would be a few dozen, or 40, 50 sannyasins. There were a few who were my close friends. So I was around them some, but as time went by and the ranch became more established, and some of the controversy that you see in the documentary, the Netflix documentary, Wild Wild Country, as that evolved, then it became more of a solo venture,
Now, you did bring up the ranch. I'd be interested to know, like, with the couple of trips that you took to the ranch, what were they like, and what are some of the like memories or things that you saw that stand out most in your memory?
Well, I spent a week there in the summer of 1983, I think it was. So I was 16, and I believe that much of the footage that you see in the documentary of the celebratory, large groups of people is probably from that festival, or one like it. So the festival for us is a week-long celebration. Bhagwan really was a proponent of celebrating everything in life, even those things that we deem negative. So I jumped on a bus full of sannyasins from Santa Cruz to the ranch in Oregon, a chartered bus, and I was there for a week. And my memories of that are, I believe, if I recall correctly, every day we had satsang, what we called satsang, which is a few hours, 1 or 2 hours of music, meditation, being in Bhagwan's presence and energy. He wasn't speaking at that time, but he would be present in a very large hall full of probably thousands of us. And all of my memories of being at the ranch are quite fond. It was a joyful, playful, relaxing, spiritual experience.
Hopefully you're enjoying the show, and if you are, make sure you subscribe and never miss an episode. You can find us on all your usual podcast sites: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and a whole lot more. including YouTube, and we want to hear what you think, so be sure to leave us a review. Just search Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. To be honest, like from what I see and from what you're telling me, it does sound fairly appealing. I mean, one thing that came to mind, I realize, is that meditation, I don't know what it was like back in the early 80s or how like well known it was, but obviously it's something today that is so popular, and it really seems like everyone, or not everyone, but it seems like very, very widespread, almost ubiquitous now, and we do know the benefits of it. There's clear benefits of meditation. In the early 80s, I don't know, maybe you can offer some insight, but I don't know how prevalent that was. And I can imagine someone coming along and showing like this practice, which really does help and really does have like an impact, must be so insightful and must have been like just a real gift. Like, were you familiar with meditation before you were introduced or you became a sannyasin?
I was, because it's part of 12-step programs. However, Bhagwan, what I liked about being a Rajneeshee, and I guess a follower, if you want to call it that, never felt like a follower, but a follower of Bhagwan, a student, a learner, I would say, was that he incorporated virtually every religion, facets of every religion. It was all inclusive. And meditation for us was not just sitting, in a yoga pose or whatever. Essentially, as I understood it, Bhagwan's philosophy was make everything a meditation. If you work, if you walk, if you are going to dinner, whatever it may be, anything can be a meditation. But he also had kind of formal meditations. We had very active meditations. So there were various forms of it. And one of the requirements, I guess I'll just go over real quickly what I understood to be the 4 requirements really to be a Rajneeshee, is that you wear the mala, wear the colors, change your name, and meditate. And that's really all it was required. And even that was optional. I mean, one of the requirements was to get your mala and get your name and join, so to speak, and I sort of put that in quotation marks, was to meditate every day for 30 days. So that's what I did. And that was a very dynamic, it was actually called dynamic meditation. It had 3 different facets. One of them was a very active, physically active facet. So it was not just meditation, but it was various forms of meditation and spirituality, really, that was intended to pervade your whole life.
I definitely get the appeal to that, and I think that, who knows, maybe when I was around that time, I could have been drawn into it. I say that I don't know. I've never really been exposed to, the closest thing I've been to, or the closest thing I can relate to being anything like that is I've been to rainbow gatherings and Burning Man multiple times, but that's, even then, there's not a strong religious element in either of those things. It's just more of an attempt of community. So I don't really know. I don't really have much to compare it to, but do you see any comparisons, or have you seen any other comparisons in society or outside of like this religion, this cult, whatever you might call it, in life since leaving this?
Not really. Maybe some facets of Buddhism, but I'm certainly not an expert on that. I think that our whole, that's why I guess to me, I still don't see it as a religion or even a cult. I see it as a community. I see it as a very just a hub for spirituality. It was very inclusive. He would speak about Christian philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, Hindu philosophies, New Age philosophies. I mean, it was, and you really sort of made that experience whatever was right for you. Nothing was really required. If you went to the ranch and you didn't want to go to satsang every day, you don't have to go. But we wanted to. We actually, and it's the kind of thing that I'm going to liken it to giving birth. If you haven't done it, you don't
I have
know
not.
what it's like. And I can't explain it. It's experiential. We had on that bus from Santa Cruz, it had, I don't know, maybe 30 of us. We had a reporter along writing a story. And I just thought the whole time how crazy it must seem to him. But you have to be immersed in it and you get it. It's a feeling. It's really not dogmatic. It's not intellectual. It's just an experience. Very blissful, spiritual, elevated consciousness experience.
I'd be curious to know as well. Did you ever like meet Bhagwan or have any words with him, or what was the closest kind of like proximity you might have had with him?
I did not have a one-on-one with Bhagwan by that time. He had thousands of followers, and like, as you know, we owned the ranch in Oregon. The closest proximity were two things. Each day we were there for the festival. Like I said, we would have satsang. I believe that was every day, and he would be present. So he's present in a large kind of outdoor hall, and you see some footage of that on the documentary. So you can see it's pretty heavily populated. We're all there. And then once a day, as you probably have seen, if you've seen the documentary, he would drive by in his Rolls Royce and we would all stand on the edges of the road. Those experiences are like taking a drug almost. I mean, it's just, the energy and is so intense. It's intoxicating. So those may sound like, you know, they may sound like it's so far away, but you can feel it, and you can feel him, and you can feel all of those around you. So it's a very affecting experience.
Yeah, almost like an energy in the air. I can understand that.
Yeah, like if you go to a club, for example, let's say, to dance, and you walk in and it's just everyone's in a great mood, the music is pumping, there's a vibe, right? There's an energy that's contagious immediately and puts you in a different mood. That's why people go. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Now, I would also love to understand a bit more about Antelope, in the sense that the documentary focused a lot on them. Now, I understand you probably maybe took the bus directly to the ranch, so maybe you didn't spend much time there, but I would love to know if you did, or if you had any interactions with the residents there.
I never went to Antelope. You're right. The bus the bus actually broke down part of the way there. We had to fix it. But anyway, so the bus did take us directly into the ranch. It was chartered to do so. So I never had any interaction with the residents. The only exposure I have really to the residents, of Antelope, which I'm not going to say it shocked me, but it was a bit repugnant, or those folks who were in the documentary, who I felt were very opinionated and conservative and closed-minded. But I was not on the forefront of the liaison with the local community, so I probably can't speak to that very well.
I understand. That makes sense. That's fair. And really, I'd like to know, like, how did it come to an end for you? And how did you leave?
Well, unlike the concept many people have of a cult that's going to draw you in and control you and never loosen its grip, it wasn't like that at all whatsoever. Not for me. It was all voluntary, and actually, in my particular case, I went to the ranch twice, as I told you, and I would have gone again, but for the fact that I got pregnant at 17, and due to that, I couldn't return to the ranch during the pregnancy because the ranch is pretty remote and rural, and did not have the medical facilities at the level of being able to accommodate, potential complications of a pregnancy or premature birth or something. So pregnant women weren't allowed on the ranch for safety reasons. So I was precluded during that time. And then of course had a young child, a baby, an infant. So I wasn't able to return. And then as time passed, that's when I guess the cult started to break down and have difficulty within itself and with the community, local community in Oregon. So over time, it just really sort of faded and disbanded. And so I didn't really have to leave. I still I guess I never left. I never disassociated myself from all that I learned and loved and experienced there. I feel like I still am a
Hmm.
sannyasin. I still am a Rajneeshee, but I don't wear all the stuff. I still have my mala, as you know.
Hmm.
Uh, my husband of 17 years was a sannyasin too, and he would often call me by my sannyas name, as well as my legal name.
Hmm.
So I guess I kind of never left
Hmm.
officially, and it's still within me. And I've certainly never joined any other spiritual group.
Okay. The only question I'd really love to know before we go is like you've seen the documentary. Do you feel like there's any kind of anything that was, I suppose, from your own perspective, like maybe not represented clearly or maybe somewhat distorted, or anything that you feel like it did a good job of, or potentially maybe a bad job of, from your own perspective of like if there's any blanks which were left missing?
From my perspective and my experience, I actually felt the documentary was, and of course, there are aspects of the documentary to which I could not speak. They have some pretty high level sannyasins in there on that documentary. I wasn't involved at that level. I wasn't in charge of the legal team, for
Hmm.
example, so I couldn't speak to that. I wasn't, in any position of power really. But from my experience, I felt like the documentary did a really good job of opening a window to the experience of being a sannyasin was. In my view, the documentary did a pretty good job of showing the very, I guess, redneck,
Hmm.
conservative, fearful, and prejudicial view of the Antelope residents.
Hmm.
And I also thought it was interesting that, and I appreciate that the documentary showed the bombing of a
Hmm.
hotel, which was housing sannyasins. That was their first strike. They
Yeah.
drew first blood.
Hmm.
And I feel like that fact gets lost in the mix of what came later. I
Hmm.
mean, there could have been much more significant loss of life. And I guess there's kind of the assumption that should just take that and sit down and
Hmm.
not feel that we need to protect ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not really very pro gun or anything. I'm not at all. So I don't defend the weaponry and the militia and that kind of thing. I don't really concur with that.
Hmm.
But I do think it's vital to note that they bombed us. We had no weapons. We had done nothing violent or aggressive, and
Hmm.
they bombed us first.
Hmm.
So I think that's a kind of a lost point.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an incredibly aggressive move.
In
Yeah,
a
and it's not a
hotel,
health, it's not a fair or healthy outlet of disappointment or anger for not for the system not bringing you the results that you want. Yeah.
yes, and not in a military situation,
Yeah.
in a public civilian hotel, to my
Mm.
understanding. I think that's important to note.
Hmm. I think you're absolutely right. That's it really for all my questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners or take this opportunity to that you think they should know, or is there anything else which you would like to conclude the show on?
Well, I thank you for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it. It's fun. I guess my parting words would be that this really never felt to me like a dogmatic, controlling cult or religion. It always felt very based on love, humanitarian principles, and spiritual principles.
Yeah,
That's all it was.
I can understand that. That definitely for me shone through as a real motivation for the people that lived there and
Yep.
shared those similar ethics and vibes and intentions. And I also want to say thank you for joining me because yeah, this has been such a fantastic opportunity, not only for myself, but for anyone that's listening to, I think, get a small glimpse into another perspective beyond what this very wildly popular documentary um has shown us. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, have a wonderful day. And I hope that the positivity that you've clearly adopted and learned from this experience stays with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Sam. And actually, I'll say one more thing.
Hmm.
Watching the documentary made me long for those days and miss it so much.
Yeah, I can imagine that would have made you very reminiscent of those
Yeah.
times. Yeah. Yeah. Growing a company has many hurdles, from securing funding to expanding your business capabilities to ranking better on search. Each business challenge is uniquely complex. The solution to these challenges is growth-focused digital PR and marketing, and that's where our sponsor Publicize comes in. Publicize sets itself apart from traditional PR companies. It does not charge large retainers or churns out press releases whether you've got a newsworthy announcement or not. Publicize builds on your business's online presence and gets high quality PR and media coverage for startups and entrepreneurs who are priced out of a broken PR industry. And for a limited time only, exclusive to Brains Bite Back listeners, you can receive a social media assessment as part of your package for any tier of service at no extra charge with this special promotion. To find out more, visit publicize.co/BBB. That's publicize.co/BBB. This is the end of today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this and you want to hear more episodes just like it, then follow and subscribe to Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube under the channel of our publication, The Sociable. Just search Brains Bite Back and you'll find all of our episodes there. We really love hearing what you have to say, so leave us a review on iTunes or on any other podcasting platform to let us know what you think. You can also reach out on Twitter at The Sociable. And finally, go to sociable.co where you can find all our episodes and plenty of articles on topics just like this. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.